What if I told you that in the modern corporation, your boss gets rich, not despite firing you, but precisely because of it? That the entire system has been engineered since the 1980s to reward executives and shareholders when headcount is cut, while the people who actually do the work absorb the downside through stagnant wages and sudden unemployment? And that this is not personal greed alone, but the logical outcome of a legal and cultural shift that redefined the purpose of business itself. Yeah, you heard that right. When profits rise, the gains flow overwhelmingly to the top through stock-based compensation, buybacks, and dividends. When costs must be trimmed, the first target is always labor. The chief executive officer, who announces 10,000 layoffs while the stock price jumps 8%, is not failing. He is succeeding brilliantly by the only metrics that matter to boards and investors. If you have ever watched your job disappear while the executive suite celebrated with record bonuses, then you're about to get the full, unfiltered breakdown that explains why this happens again and again and why it is not an accident. Stick with me until the very end, because the history of how shareholder primacy took over the data on wage stagnation versus productivity, the mechanics of executive pay packages, and the cold arithmetic that turns your firing into their fortune will leave you equal parts furious and clear-eyed. If you are tired of being told that hard work alone is enough while the system extracts value from your labor, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss these deep dives, and drop a comment below telling me whether you have personally seen this asymmetry in your own career, or if this explanation has you seeing corporate America differently for the first time. I read every single comment, and we are building this conversation together as a community that demands the real story behind the layoffs and the stock pops. Welcome to Money's Hidden Past. Rich people lied. We fact-checked. Let us begin in the early 1970s, because that is when the rules of the game quietly changed forever and set the stage for the asymmetry we live with today. In 1970, Milton Friedman published a now legendary article in the New York Times declaring that the sole social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. This idea, which had been simmering in academic circles for years, exploded into mainstream corporate thinking during the 1980s under the influence of deregulation, tax cuts, and the rise of hostile takeovers. Boards of directors suddenly faced enormous pressure to deliver one thing above all else: shareholder value. Labor, which had once been viewed as a long-term partner in many American companies, was reclassified as a variable cost to be minimized at every opportunity. The cultural shift was swift and total. Chief executive officers who focused on employees' communities or long-term stability were pushed aside in favor of those who could drive immediate gains in share price. Jack Welch at General Electric became the poster child of this new era, slashing tens of thousands of jobs while growing the stock price dramatically and earning the nickname Neutron Jack because he left the buildings standing but removed the people. This was not an isolated story. It became the new operating system for American capitalism, and it remains the default setting in 2026. The mechanics are brutally simple, and they explain why your boss gets rich while you get fired. In the shareholder primacy model, the legal and cultural duty of the corporation is to maximize returns for owners above every other consideration. Profits are no longer shared broadly with the workforce through wages and benefits. Instead, they are funneled overwhelmingly to executives and shareholders through stock-based compensation, massive share buybacks, and dividends. Executive pay packages are explicitly tied to share price performance, not to employee retention or long-term stability. When revenue grows, the chief executive officer receives millions in restricted stock units that vest when the price rises. When costs must be cut, the easiest and fastest lever is always headcount, because employees are an expense line item, while capital is an asset to be protected. The result is a predictable pattern. A company announces 10,000 layoffs, the stock jumps 8% on the news because Wall Street rewards lower costs and higher margins, and the chief executive officer collects another 8-figure bonus. This is not failure. By the metrics that now govern corporate America, this is success. The data on this asymmetry is overwhelming and has been tracked for decades by economists at the Economic Policy Institute and other independent researchers. From 1979 to 2026, worker productivity in the United States rose more than 80%, while compensation for the typical worker rose only about 15% after adjusting for inflation. Where did the difference go? Straight into the pockets of executives and shareholders. The ratio of chief executive officer pay to average worker pay exploded from roughly 20 to 1 in the 1960s to more than 300 to 1 today, depending on the year and the company. In 2025, the average chief executive officer at an S&P 500 company earned approximately 386 times what the median employee earned. Stock-based compensation now makes up the majority of executive pay. So every layoff that boosts earnings per share directly pads the chief executive officer's personal wealth. Share buybacks, which have totaled more than $10 trillion across American companies since the 1980s, further inflate stock prices by reducing the number of shares outstanding. The money used for those buybacks could have gone to raises or job security, but it flows to the owners instead. This is not a glitch. It is the system working exactly as designed. Consider what happens inside a typical large corporation when the next downturn or efficiency drive arrives. The board demands higher margins. The chief executive officer looks at the cost structure. Research and development might be cut, but that risks future growth. Marketing can be trimmed, but that risks revenue. The fastest, safest cut is always people. 10,000 employees at an average salary of $75,000 each represent $750 million in annual savings. The stock market rewards the move instantly because earnings per share rise, and the chief executive officer's stock options become more valuable. Meanwhile, the laid-off workers lose health insurance, lose retirement contributions, and often face months or years of unemployment. The asymmetry is structural. Executives capture the upside through equity grants and bonuses. Employees absorb the downside through job loss and wage stagnation. This pattern accelerated dramatically after the 1980s, when changes in securities laws made stock buybacks easier, and when institutional investors began demanding quarterly results. The modern corporation has become an extraction machine optimized for capital, not for people. Your boss does not get rich despite your firing. He gets rich because of it. The energetic irony that makes this system so durable is that it is defended in the language of efficiency and shareholder democracy. Boards argue that maximizing share price benefits everyone because pension funds and retirement accounts own stocks. That is true for the top 20% of households who own the vast majority of equities. But it offers little comfort to the median worker whose 401k is modest and whose wages have not kept pace with the gains flowing to the top. The result is a predictable transfer of wealth from labor to capital that has widened inequality for 4 decades. Studies from the Federal Reserve show that the top 1% of Americans now own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. And corporate policies since the 1980s have been a major driver of that shift. Wages for production and non-supervisory workers stagnated while chief executive officer compensation soared because the rules were rewritten to prioritize one group over the other. This is not conspiracy. It is the cold arithmetic of late-stage capitalism, where labor is a cost to be minimized, and capital is the only stakeholder that truly matters. The human cost is what makes the system so destructive. Workers who lose jobs to these efficiency drives often face long-term scars, lower lifetime earnings, reduced retirement savings, and higher rates of mental health issues. Families lose homes, children change schools, and entire communities hollow out when a major employer announces mass layoffs. Meanwhile, the chief executive officer who engineered the cuts receives another 8-figure payout and moves on to the next board seat. This is not personal malice in most cases. It is the logical outcome of incentive structures that tie executive wealth directly to share price performance. Boards are composed largely of other chief executive officers and major investors who benefit from the same system. The culture rewards the short-term stock pop over long-term stability. The employee who has given 20 years of loyal service becomes a line item on a spreadsheet when the next quarter demands it. The deeper structural point is that this model was not inevitable. Before the 1980s, many American companies operated with a stakeholder view that balanced shareholders with employees, customers, and communities. The shift to pure shareholder primacy was a deliberate choice driven by academic theory deregulation and the rise of activist investors. Once it took hold, it became self-reinforcing. Companies that did not play the game faced hostile takeovers or pressure from Wall Street. Those that did saw their stock prices rise and their chief executive officers rewarded. The system now runs on autopilot. When profits rise, the gains flow to the top. When costs must be cut, the first target is always people. Your firing is not collateral damage, it is the feature. The mature recognition here is that this is not a glitch in the system. It is the system working exactly as designed since the 1980s. The modern corporation has been optimized for capital extraction, not for human flourishing. Executives capture the upside, employees absorb the downside, wages stagnate relative to productivity, layoffs become profit events. This is the cold arithmetic that explains why your boss gets rich while you get fired. Understanding it is the first step toward demanding something different, whether through better incentive structures, stronger worker protections, or a cultural shift that values labor as a partner rather than a cost. Until then, the machine will keep running exactly as built. If this deep dive into why your boss gets rich while you get fired and how the system has been engineered since the 1980s to reward capital over people fired you up about seeing the real mechanics behind corporate decisions, then do me a favor right now. Smash that like button to let the algorithm know this conversation matters. Share this video with every friend and family member who has ever been on the wrong end of a layoff announcement, and let us keep exposing what they do not want you to see. I will catch you in the next one, where we break down the next hidden chapter in how wealth and power actually flow in the modern economy. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, and remember that in the current system, your firing is not a failure. It is the plan working perfectly.